God's Not Dead, Evidence for God in an Age of Uncertainty, and he's the co-founder of Every Nation family of churches. It includes more than 1,000 churches in 60 countries. And he's a senior minister at Bethel World Outreach Church in Nashville, Tennessee. He's got degrees from Mississippi State. I know you'll like that, Tim.
There
already.
You go. Well, that's a good start.
That's
right.
Right. Reformed Theological Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi, and a doctorate from Fuller Theological in Pasadena, California. And Rice, we're glad to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. And let me just give y'all a commercial. That Stephen McDowell is one of my longtime friends. That is going to be fantastic. I was hearing the tour you were mentioning, but that is the smartest brother I know, and he is what a great treat to have Stephen giving you that tour. So whoever's listening, that is a very, very good tour, and Stephen is one of the best there is, if not the best.
Stephen McDowell. That's exactly why I hired him, for the very reasons
Wonderful.
You mentioned, Rice. That brother is a walking encyclopedia.
Yeah, he comes into my house giving the tour. You don't even have to go to the site. You just ask him to say the prayer, and he just starts saying, prayer began in America, and he just starts to.
Wow.
Anyway, I just thought I'd give y'all a shout out because I just love Stephen. He's such a good man.
Yeah,
so
he is.
Anyway, it's going to be a great tour.
Absolutely. Hey, so tell us what your day job is here.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. About a year and a half ago, I'll just cut to the chase and work backwards. About a year and a half ago, there's a Christian singing group called the Newsboys, and they have a song called God's Not Dead, and kids around the country just responded in these concerts because it gave them, in essence, something to cheer about. You've heard the John Lennon Imagine There's No Heaven and all of the different the catcalls from the skeptical side saying that God is dead and that God is a delusion. And so they came to me in a group here and said, would you write a book that basically gives the reasons to believe? We're singing the song, and other Christian music artists out there are out there saying and declaring God's reality, but we need more details because these kids, once they get to college and even in high school, they're getting blown away by these skeptical arguments. So I took most of 2012, though I am a pastor, and do work on college campuses as a kind of an overgrown campus minister, the world's oldest living teenager. I'm out, whether it be UCLA or Florida State or was down in Miami area. But my passion is to reach out to this next generation. And but this book Thomas Nelson is published it, but I think it gives the specifics to a new generation of young people that can answer the critics and what they're saying today, because what they're saying today may be a little bit different than what they said a few years ago. It's changing, the accusations, the taunts of the skeptics. And so this book is about giving people the evidence for God and the ability, hopefully, to articulate that to a skeptical world.
Rice, how can you prove God's existence, though? I mean, God doesn't show himself in a physical material way like humans do.
Right. Well, but evidence, if you're looking for Steve Jobs, you don't break the computer down and say he wasn't there, or you don't look for the artist by tearing the painting apart and saying, well, he wasn't here. Or my favorite one that John Lennox likes to say, you won't, just because you understand how a Ford motor car works doesn't mean Henry Ford doesn't exist, but you do see evidence for his work, for the intelligent mind behind the universe. And so it really is a matter of what are you looking for? Are we looking for, if we say there's no evidence for God, well, he's not a physical thing like you said, but there is evidence that an intelligent mind is behind not only the universe, but life itself, the morality that's within us. And then ultimately, we just had Easter. I kind of say it a little bit differently sometimes, but ultimately the ultimate science experiment happened, if you will, when God became a man in Christ. And it was the Almighty himself, the creator of it all, who manifested in human flesh. And he was handled. He was tested. He didn't just come down for a one-day visit and disappear. He was there for over 33 years. And the last 3 was excruciating detailed testing, and it verified ultimately through his resurrection in history that he was the Son of God. So you can't get any more. If people say, well, why won't God come down here personally and not just let us see the evidence of him through his work? but we want to see him. That's exactly what happened when Jesus of Nazareth walked the earth, was crucified and raised from the dead. God visited us.
Rice Brooks is our guest, Broocks. What'd you stick the C in there for?
You know what? That's just I'm on Ancestry.com trying to figure it out. I think it came over from England or something, and somebody got tired of being confused and stuck the C in there.
Yeah.
We'll say it's for Christian.
Because I was asking our producer for the show, is it Broocks or what?
No, it's Brooks. It's
just straight up Brooks.
It's just an old-fashioned Brooks. Yeah,
Gotcha.
Just has that C in there.
Rice Brooks is our guest. He's the author of God's Not Dead, Evidence for God in an Age of Uncertainty, published by Thomas Nelson. America used to be, a few decades ago, a Christian nation in the sense that a majority of Americans would self-identify as Christians. I don't think that's so anymore. I would say we live in an age, as you say here, of uncertainty. So you still have a substantial percentage of Americans who would call themselves Christians or believers or followers of Christ, but a lot of people just view that as sort of grandma's religion, today, and they are, would you call a lot of Americans skeptics? Would you call them secular humanists? Would you call them relativists? I mean, what would you say?
Good thing. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that what's happened is nominal Christianity, liberalism has, caused, churches that don't really believe in the Bible, and this is just the Christian ethic versus the reality that Jesus was the Son of God, and that, he was born of a virgin and raised from the dead, and that his miracles validated who he is. People want to extract, people want to extract the miraculous and just say, well, can't we just keep the Christian ethic? And so there's a lot of people that would identify with Christian, the philosophy of Christianity, and that they would think that would mean, doing good, being a nice person and whatnot. I think where the problem is that on the college campuses, this is where the scientific and philosophical skepticism is entrenched. And whatever happens on a campus becomes pretty much a part of the culture within, 5 to 7 years. And so what's happened over these last couple of generations, over the last couple of decades rather, is that a lot of this stuff has just gone unchallenged. And so whether it be all the way back to Darwin and evolution, and that's kind of gone fairly unchecked, and then Nietzsche at the turn of the 20th century said God is dead, and basically he wasn't saying God lived and then died. He just said the Christian view of God and morality is dead, because he said, I don't believe in God, so all this acting good and being good people doesn't have any basis. Even Nietzsche would have admitted that without God there is no basis for morality. And I know I'm not really directly answering your question, but I think there's a confusion, and I think people would claim, depending on what day of the week, well, I believe I'm a Christian. Well, no, I'm a skeptic, and I think that skepticism has had its impact to where people who would have said I'm a Christian a few years ago might say I'm spiritual, or I don't really go to church, but I'm just kind of a, like one kid told me on the campus, he said, I have a personal relationship with myself. I thought, well, what? That's just special. I don't know how to what that meant. But,
Yeah.
I mean, you get those kind of esoteric, almost like, the only way to call it is just kind of weird, But here's what the skeptics have done for us, because what I'm describing is what's called postmodernism. And the postmodern condition is a state that says everybody's story is equally true. Everybody's. And so what's happened in America is it postmodernism, and it affects the church, where people can say, I'm a Christian, but that doesn't mean that if you have another expression that's equally valid. So that causes evangelism, that causes the spread of the gospel to diminish, and we just kind of end up saying, well, if we're Christians, let's just be nice to people. But what the skeptics have done for us is they've come along and said, no, not every story is equally true. Our story is true. Because Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Dan Bennett, Bill Maher, they're not postmodern. They believe that the story of the Darwinian past and that there is no God is the true story. And so they're coming at us with the conviction of what Christians should have, because we should believe that our story isn't just valuable, but our story is valid. So because skepticism has such a definitive story to tell, it's forcing people to stand up and say, do I believe what I really, am I holding a Bible that I believe is true? Do I really believe that Jesus is the exclusive Son of God? And I think it's causing robust Christianity, real, people who say, I know Jesus is real, and they're proclaiming him in their classrooms and their families. I think that kind of Christianity is on the rise. So even though maybe some of the numbers of church attendance might be dropping, I think that's a lot of nominal faith falling away, but we're seeing tremendous signs of growth. And I think I'll hush on this statement, let you get a word in here, but it's like what it says, when the wheat and the tares both are growing up at the same time. Isaiah says there'll be gross darkness over the earth, but my light and my glory will shine on you. So I really think that there's a rise in skepticism, but there's also a rise in real faith that's emerging.
I can understand, John and Rice, a person who is an agnostic, because an agnostic says, I don't know whether there exists a God or not. I'm open to the possibility. That's my understanding of agnosticism. A atheist, I can't understand, because, as you said earlier in the program, Rice, the organization and the logic to the universe, and you just observe the human body, for instance, not to mention the complexities of just the eye, for example. There's no way that this is happenstance, or the things just came up. The way that the Bible talks about even human nature, what the Bible has to say about human nature is true. So, but the universe, the way that the Earth, is the only planet that has life on it. I mean, all these things couldn't have been coincidental. And so, is atheism? That doesn't seem to be very popular. I mean, I know you have these high academics and intellectuals. You mentioned Dawkins and some of those guys, but to me, it doesn't seem like atheism is the attraction. Maybe that anymore. It's the spiritualism. It's the sort of I'll make up my own religion type thing. And when you talk to these people who do this, make up their own religion, and when you try to have a conversation with them to sort of find out what it is they believe and why they believe it, it's like nailing Jello to the wall. They're all over the place, and they don't. So, you want to comment on the? Did I get agnosticism? Did I get agnosticism and atheism defined correctly?
Yeah, I think you did, and really, the atheists will say that agnostics are just lazy. That is, in their minds, if you do the hard work, don't. It's like saying I'm undecided. You aren't going to vote.
Yeah.
And stunningly, I mean, I'm not wanting to give unbelief any more credit than it's due, or I don't want to overstate it for the sake of a sensational deal here. But I mean, this past weekend, the American Atheists held their convention in Austin, Texas. 50th anniversary. The foundation was Madeline Murray O'Hare, if you remember that name. And so there were 6 pastors that debated, 6 atheists. News media there, all kinds of stuff. And the 3 of the pastors got my book. At least I know one particularly did, and the second one did. But I think he was getting all of them a copy. And so I talked to 3 of them, preparing them. The skeptics tell their story with great conviction, and especially among young people. You can go from a young person that says, I don't want to go to church. Church is filled with hypocrites and all those typical excuses. And now skepticism gives them this line to say, we don't believe any of it's true. And they get taken out by what I call drive-by shootings. God's a fairy tale. The Bible's filled with contradictions. These are the things that the average young person gets taken out by. I mean, this is going to upset the moms listening or grandmothers that are praying and listening to your station for, cues on in what to pray for in our country. But 3 out of 4 young people who leave high school will abandon their faith once they get to college. 3 out of 4. The Pew Foundation in 2007 asked the question to age groups. They call them millennials. It's 18 to 29. They asked the question in 2007, do you ever doubt the existence of God? 83% said no. They asked the same question, do you ever doubt the existence of God? This is 18 to 29-year-olds. Last year, it was down to 68%. So within a 5-year period, there was a 15-point drop. So what that tells you is there's a growing group of people that aren't sure. And their lack of certainty is because they haven't heard the evidence for God. They just think, well, maybe it's just my subjective experience. And you need an experience of Jesus. You need to experience him as your Savior. But God has called us to love him with our mind and our heart as well. And so there is overwhelming evidence. That's what this book, God's Not Dead, is saying, is that we can give young people and adults the evidence that they need so that they know that their faith is not based on just their feeling, but it is the most rock-solid, logical, rational decision to not only believe in God, but to believe that this God who created us revealed himself specifically in the form of Jesus Christ and verified it by his resurrection, which we obviously just celebrated this weekend.
You're listening to Today's Issues, and our guest is Rice Broocks. He's the author of the book, God's Not Dead, Evidence for God in an Age of Uncertainty. And in the book, he looks at 9 basic proofs of God's existence. It's a book that you need to get a hold of. And Rice, what is the very best website to reach you and to find out more about this book?
Well, there's ricebrooks.com with that funny spelling, Brooks, B-R-O-O-C-K-S. God'sNotDead.org is really a resource center. If you're a pastor or if you're listening and you want to tell your pastor about the book, we've got